Thanks, Jim. I thought I'd begin our hour by reading a couple of paragraphs from a service Martin gave earlier this year, April, entitled Genuine Understanding. We have an awareness of the reality of the creative process, the way by which all things are made new. Made new, first of all, in oneself. Until that happens, the creative process in focused expression can go no further insofar as one's own field of responsibility is concerned. We have had much opportunity to learn what it means to participate in the creative process. We are very familiar with the little word let. This is a word which carries a meaning central to the creative process. Let there be purging in this vine. Only so can there be a bringing forth of more fruit, the fruit consequent upon the working of the creative process, not based, certainly, in any of the manipulative efforts of the human nature which we have known in the past. As this unfoldment occurs in our own experience, we naturally come to a point where we may bring forth much fruit, where the fulfillment of the purposes inherent in the creative process may be brought to pass. And then later, we have genuine understanding, which is quite different to what we have imagined understanding to be in the human nature state. To the extent that we are aware of the movement of the creative process in our own experience and in what we are capable of observing, we have understanding. To that extent, we have understanding. There it is. It's moving. Let it move. Trust it to move. Trust it to bring forth what needs to be brought forth. I'm sure that we have all reached a point where we are not about to trust our own efforts anymore. Haven't we made enough mess on that basis? Why continue? Let it be the creative process. We have experience of that to the extent that we have been willing to let it be that way. And because we have let it be that way, we understand. We understand what happens. We are aware of this working of the magnetic force, for instance. We can see the effects of it both in attraction and repulsion. There it is, obvious. Why deny it? Why deny that we understand? We do understand. And the moment that we acknowledge that we understand, we acknowledge the Father. The Father. I believe you shared a tape earlier this week entitled Cosmic Mind, which could be another phrase for the Father. Cosmic mind, as Yolanda pointed out, is everywhere. The creative process is everywhere. Human beings, having become self-centered, have become isolated in consciousness from union in the creative process and with cosmic mind. So one of our responsibilities is to let ourselves be consciously re-included in cosmic mind, the creative process. If we pause to think of for a moment, we'll realize that the Spirit of God, life, is obviously animating everything, everywhere. Now, intellectually, that can be acknowledged, I would think. There's nothing much else to activate anything except the Spirit of life. The implications of that are tremendous. If it is true that the one Spirit, and therefore the one intelligence, is doing everything, everywhere, how come we're the slightest bit worried or the slightest bit concerned to try to do everything? It's already being done. We have, as an individual, a very small part to play in any given moment with what is already going on throughout the whole cosmos. So the implications of living in that awareness and functioning in that awareness, I would suggest, is quite different to what we may have experienced heretofore and what everyone else seems to be experiencing. Cosmic mind is one. It's not little packets of consciousness either, actually. Either as an individual consciousness or as the body of mankind. But more than that, all the forms of which we are aware, their consciousness is a part of cosmic mind. And then, of course, there are forms at other levels which are not visible to the human eye. So cosmic mind permeates all the dimensions of being. And there are focalizations in these various dimensions. I think one point just to one small example of this, that we can be living our lives wherever we live them. And take the matter of relationship, for example. Suddenly, we feel a kinship, a closer kinship with someone that's been there for ages. And we begin to work more closely with that person. And naturally, something occurs in our world because of that closer connection. My question would be, what caused the current suddenly to intensify? We usually accept these things as, well, maybe we don't even think about it. It just happened. How lovely. But there are levels of consciousness, intelligence, which coordinate patterns of activity below itself. We say the Lord, perhaps. Well, the Lord isn't just one being sat on a throne up in the sky somewhere, though that's probably the image that comes to mind. But there are patterns of focalization in the undimensional levels of being which are responsible for coordinating factors which are emerging in the dimensional world. Therefore, relationships may not be as, what would be the word? Spontaneous, we think, at our level, haphazard, luck, chance. No. There's something emerging from cosmic mind, and there's purpose to it. That's one example. To reconnect consciously into the reservoir of awareness inherent in cosmic mind is part of our responsibility. How do we do this? In that tape, Yolanda pointed out, for example, that in your world, your creative field, which you center, there may develop a pressure pattern, most of which we cause for ourselves. But anyway, the pressure pattern develops, and pressure patterns can develop just in the creative process, which is fine, increasingly fine if we know how to let that situation, if what needs to be done specifically does not come immediately to mind, because probably of a lack of qualitative substance in the consciousness of this form, then there is a process whereby we may begin to let this pressure situation, for which we have some responsibility, to be connected up into cosmic mind, which certainly has all the answers, because it's doing, cosmic mind is doing one thing simultaneously everywhere throughout the whole cosmos in any given moment. It's all coordinated. So if we find a pressure pattern developing in our field, it is related to the whole. And human beings, in their relatively unconscious state, have usually used prayer. A pressure situation develops in their world and they pray. Unfortunately, their prayer is not the true process. Usually the human ego, consciousness prayer is to think what it thinks would be creative in an isolated sense and ask cosmic mind, God, the Lord, the whole, to do that. I'm suggesting that there is, in fact, a true prayer in this way. There is a way of letting, is that word, letting the situation be offered to the Lord, to cosmic mind, the higher levels of consciousness, inviting those levels of intelligence to come into one's world. And interestingly enough, I have found from experience, and you may have too, that very often inviting cosmic mind to come into the situation, the biggest part of what comes into the situation actually comes through oneself. I remember a situation where there was someone who was causing me grief in my environment. And I'd been concerned about this situation. It was quite a thorn in the emotional flesh. And if I'd been praying in the usual way, I would have prayed for this person to be posted to Glen Ivy. Anyway, I went through this process that I've just described of offering up. And in the midst of that process, I became aware that actually what I needed to do was to enfold that person. because the process in my own heart had been to start pushing and rejecting. Exactly the opposite was actually what was required. And in the process of offering it, my responsibility in the overall picture was to make space in my consciousness and heart to accommodate that person. And having done that, something was introduced into the situation which was not there before. Now, cosmic mind was no doubt doing something relative to this person and the situations through other aspects of the design of life, but that's what came for me to do. And the person's still around. So, true prayer, that process, is a way of making connection, of connecting your world, for which you have responsibility, with cosmic mind, so that the purposes of the whole can be implemented through the connecting link which one rightly is. So there is prayer that we experience upwards. But there is another direction of responsibility for which we carry also, and that is recognizing that we are a part of cosmic mind, a link in the chain, and there are factors in your world, below you, around you, which are praying to you. Most people, of course, aren't aware of that. They're quite keen to get cosmic mind to sort out their pressure patterns. But very few human consciousnesses have awoken to the responsibility of being a part of cosmic mind and therefore answering prayer, which comes to us from our creative field. Now, every moment of life is part of the experience of cosmic mind. Therefore, every person which appears in consciousness is part of our responsibility in cosmic mind. The responsibilities of angelic being in human form and in consciousness. It may not even be, it certainly may be people. The interaction with people is a part of our answering of prayer. Very often people come, sometimes they're very pleasant towards us. Well, you have prayers of praise. They're very nice. Very nice when people like us and want to help us and do things and so on. Well, that's fine. But then there are other prayers which ascend to us where we are in the design. It may be, probably a woman would notice it more, or not necessarily, but one of these drapes behind me may be have one of the rings off or something. Now, somebody may notice that. Well, could be viewed as a prayer. That object, which has its own level of consciousness and is part of the design, it enters our consciousness that something is required in the creative process. And we have opportunity to answer that prayer. We may do it ourselves, we may take note of it and have someone else do it, but it's all part of the processes of cosmic mind. And so our interaction in cosmic mind, moment by moment, is vital in every sense of that word. It is exciting. And human consciousness has been largely unconscious of its creative responsibilities. Attunement is another form by which pressure patterns, usually, in one's creative field may be connected with cosmic mind. You can begin thinking about this by thinking of someone with a physical problem. There's a pressure pattern. And actually, there's no real need to put one's hands like that. There are many forms one can use to let this situation utilize this connecting link, multi-dimensional connecting link, to access the awareness of what needs to be done in cosmic mind. But one may put one's hand thus, and there, if you consciously think about it, there is a process of prayer involved. You're letting the connection be made. And inherent in the current, as we call it, is more than just warmth or a tingling. What is it that's causing that? It is life energy. And what is in life energy? Amongst other things, the answer. Attunement can be given to any aspect of one's life. In assembly, I'm sure it's been done elsewhere, but my experience in assembly has been, for example, to have the members of the assembly think of an area of their lives in which there is a pressure pattern or an area where development is imminent. And so find an object which is a symbol of that area and come, have the symbol, utilize the symbol as a contact point for that area of their creative field, and let it be connected in a more conscious way to cosmic mind. So that it is possible to give, in a very focused way, an attunement to various aspects of one's creative field. Now, you don't need the symbol, actually. One can sit in one's chair and let the area come into focusing consciousness and let the connection be made. But a current is involved. Martin has emphasized the tone. Now, the tone is a very nebulous thing. It hasn't been very well intellectually delineated. The tone. We're supposed to do everything in the tone. The tone, one might say, is the conscious mind's connection with cosmic mind. There's this vast computer bank, is almost an insult to cosmic mind, but therein is all knowledge. There's everything there. This consciousness's connection with all that is in its attunement with the spirit of it, which is the tone. So one can see that one connects all aspects of one's creative field with cosmic mind by expressing whatever one expresses in the tone. That is the way we give an attunement, give access to cosmic mind, to whatever it is we're dealing with, by dealing with it in the tone. That's an attunement. So, what we're considering is a refocalization of cosmic consciousness in human consciousness. One might even say it's the recreation of true mind in man. The consciousness is an astounding creation. The consciousness itself. If man is the crowning creation for this planet, surely the consciousness of man is the crowning creation in man. Animals have got bodies like human beings. There's nothing so remarkable about that. But the crown, one might say, on earth is the human consciousness itself. Here is an instrument which is remarkable not only in what we've experienced of it heretofore, just in consciousness, life, we've experienced life in our consciousness. We've experienced life more in our consciousness than we have in our bodies, actually. We say obviously we've experienced life in our bodies, but there are other dimensions which are experienced in consciousness. And in consciousness also are mechanisms of creativity which have remained unconscious to the human mind in its fallen state. Yolanda once pointed out that the fallen human mind, the fallen human consciousness, has created all the inventions which it has created. But all those inventions are mere projections of designed machinery, which is, in essence, contained within the human form itself. Projections out of the subconscious, of the organ.